Hello, and welcome to Building Equity Policies and Practices to Empower All Learners. My name is Tia Gilliam-Wilson. I am an educator with 15 years of teaching experience. I've taught pre-K, kindergarten, second grade, third grade, and fifth grade. Today's learning experience will be asynchronous, meaning it will be self-paced or you'll have independent time. You will have access to the presentation as well as worksheets and tasks that you'll need to complete throughout the session. Welcome, North Carolina beginning teachers. Let's work together, do our best to learn as much as we can, and respect and support each other through all the challenges. Let's do this. Session objectives. We will cover concepts, principles, and procedures of building equity to empower all learners. You will apply this to your classroom by understanding the difference between equality and equity, as well as create and implement a plan to ensure that each student in your classroom will receive an equitable education. Curriculum objectives. To increase knowledge and understanding of ESSA, to understand the components of the Building Equity Taxonomy, identify inequities and create a plan to resolve them, to understand the importance of building equity to empower all learners. Disclaimer: the content of this presentation may be uncomfortable for some, but the hope is that you take this information back to your circle, continue the conversation, and work so we can provide all scholars the equitable education they deserve. My journey as an equity warrior began in 2015 when I was selected to participate in the Teacher Efficacy Academy. The following year, I was an instructional coach. Then I was a DTEC Tag Change Agent, which stands for Teachers Advocating to Lead Great Change. Through this project, we taught stakeholders about ESSA. And then they had DTEC Tag 2.0, and I was selected to participate in that as well. I highly suggest that you check out the deltafoundation.net, which is DTEC Tag's webpage. Also, check out their YouTube channel where you will find some amazing presentations that will help all educators along the way. We're going to start our presentation with a video called The $100 Race.
Hey, line up! Line up! Everybody line up! We're about to race! Everybody line up! Shoulder to shoulder, take off your backpacks. Basketball, line up, we're about to race. Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this, a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability. You don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go! If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
Racial equity is corrective justice for communities that have suffered oppression through enslavement, genocide, colonization, and the theft of territory. Equity seeks reparation for those who are denied the same opportunities as whites due to a long history of legislated and institutionalized racism. So now we're going to talk about ESSA. What is ESSA? ESSA replaced No Child Left Behind effective 2015. This is the reauthorization of ESSA. It is policy and laws that give states more flexibility in regards to student achievement at the local level. As it pertains to elementary and secondary schools, ESSA has 9 titles. However, we will highlight 5 of them. It is important to note that while plans were accepted by all states, they are not final and they can be changed. What is ESSA? There are 4 main categories of children that ESSA aims to assist: minorities, economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, and then English language learners. Title I, improving basic programs operated by state and local education agencies, focuses on funding. It brings both needed resources and new requirements to provide the personnel, instruction, and interventions to help close achievement gaps. Title II, preparing, training, and recruiting high-quality teachers, principals, or other school leaders, focuses on improving the quality and effectiveness of teachers, principals, and other school leaders. Title III, language instruction for English learners and immigrant students, helps ensure that English learners, including immigrant children and youth, attain English proficiency and develop high levels of academic achievement. Title IV, 21st Century Schools, is comprised of 2 large block grant programs, as well as discretionary grants and assistance programs meant to support the comprehensive needs of students in a variety of settings, strengthen family engagement, and bring America's schools into the 21st century. Title V, Flexibility and Accountability, Rural Education and Achievement Program allows states and districts the flexibility to target federal funds to the programs and activities that most effectively address the unique needs of states and localities. According to the Statement of Purpose in ESSA, the purpose of this title is to provide all children significant opportunity to receive a fair, equitable, and high-quality education and to close educational achievement gaps. So now we're going to learn what the difference between equality and equity are.
Before we can talk about equity versus equality, I want to first define diversity. At Inclusive Communities, we like to say diversity in its simplest definition means differences. We all have differences, from our glasses to our weight to how much money we have. That is diversity, and no matter how much people say it's hard to find diversity, that's not true. Diversity exists. It's about taking the time to acknowledge its existence and work to ensure action is taken to embrace these differences, not alienate them. Equality is often equated to fairness and sameness, and is based in the misconception that we all have the same needs and the same solution will work for everyone. Equity is based in access and opportunity, with the understanding that we each start with different advantages and disadvantages, and thus have different needs to attain access and opportunity. To understand equity, we have to compare it to equality. Now, I love this equity versus equality graphic, as it's the best explanation of the difference between the two. On the equality side, you see that we've got three individuals, our tall guy, our short girl, and our friend in the wheelchair. And you see that they're all trying to watch this baseball game, but there's this fence. With equality, they've each been given a box to use to be able to see the game. But obviously that's not working, because our tall friend is now super tall and sees very clearly over the fence, while our short girl can just barely see, and she's still kind of on her tiptoes and struggling to see the game, while the person in the wheelchair can't see at all and they can't even get on the box. On the equity side of this picture, you can see that now we've given each individual exactly what they need to be able to see the game. The person in the wheelchair has a ramp, so they can clearly get to the top and see the full game. The shorter girl has two boxes, which is what she needed to comfortably be able to see, and the tall person has no boxes at all because they didn't need the extra assistance in the first place. Equity is a process, which means it is continuous. We can't gain equity by changing just one thing. For example, the equity side of this photo shows our friend in the wheelchair has gained equity at this fence. But the work is not done. True progressive equity is about how can we ensure that he has equitable opportunities at all of the hypothetical and real fences in his life. Equity requires power, resources, and social responsibility to work hand in hand to change the structures and provide opportunities to those who were institutionally left out, marginalized, or oppressed. Equity is hard, but it's essential for us to make change in the lives of those who have been historically depicted as less than. From individuals with disabilities like physical, developmental, and mental, to people living in poverty without access to food or education or healthcare. It's important for us to understand that there is a long history of discrimination, which has created the present day inequities which don't allow these individuals the same access to opportunity than those who don't have those differences. One of the greatest gifts that we give to students that we work with is the opportunity to share their story and to find value in their voice. And this increases awareness and a sense of empowerment. Everyone has their own stuff. Everyone is going through something that challenges their emotional and physical capacity to be great, but there is power in connection. So now here's your challenge. Be brave and seek out those opportunities to have authentic conversations with those that are different than you. Find out what makes them unique and what brings them joy. Then you do the same. Share your story because you have value as well. Now you've built community. And with community, we have power. We is always stronger than me.
Equity focuses on dismantling whiteness. Whiteness is a culture of values that favor white people at the expense of others. In education, it prevents historically marginalized students from reaching their potential and professionals from advancing in their careers. Some school districts only place administrators of color at certain schools. What disservice and injustice is being done to the students in those schools? Next, we want to know an activity, my identity, a superpower, not an obstacle. I'd like for you to take out this worksheet titled I Am. So the first thing you're going to do is to place your name in the center and fill out each bubble with a descriptive word or words about who you are. So if I'm doing this myself, I am a mother, I am a wife, I'm an educator, I'm a cook, I'm an author, I'm an African-American female, and I'm a Christian. So those are some things that I could write in the circle to describe me. Now, in your four corners, you're going to write down one aspect of your identity on each corner. So I'm 40, I'm married, I have 2 master's degrees, and I was a teenage mother. Cross off the word next to number 3. Consider what your life would be like if you were discriminated because of it. Cross off number 1. Consider what your life would be like if you had to hide this aspect of your identity. Now we're going to watch a video on what systems might be producing inequitable outcomes in schools.
I would like to become a pediatric physical therapist so I can help kids.
I want to apply to UCLA and major in psychology.
I want to be an entrepreneur and start my own clothing brand.
I'm hoping to go to a four-year college and major in architecture.
I want to be an animator.
I want to practice law. I want to help either in civil law or immigration law because those are the things that I see that are needed in my community to move forward.
It is completely true that all students have the ability to succeed. And the only reason students are not succeeding is because they are not close enough to the opportunities that will allow them to succeed.
Education was not built for everyone, and that's the problem. And until we really start looking at that reasons behind it and look at all the isms that play into the classroom, we truly can't do what we need to do for all children.
Oftentimes, the adults and the system around us are blaming the kids for their failures. What our work is about is looking at the system around the student that is producing these outcomes.
Students that go through different things such as homelessness, foster care, even people who migrate to this country or move states needs more support to just go through the education system because they have to deal with coping with what happened to them or is happening to them.
Newcomers and English language learners, I feel like they don't get enough support.
What I think of what stood in the way of my success is the student-to-teacher ratio. I wouldn't say I didn't learn anything, but if I needed one-on-one help, I didn't always get it.
As you can see, I'm a Black woman, and obviously the system was not constructed for people of color to succeed. So every day I felt like I had to struggle extra hard to succeed in my classes.
We really have an opportunity to do better and to see students from a really asset-based lens, and it's really on us as adults and on the system to change the policies and practices and procedures that we are implementing that further perpetuate structural racism and the gaps that we see.
Some students come to us needing more. There are deficits of learning by the time they get to us because of that structural racism. They don't have the supports. Their needs aren't being met by their communities. And so we have to overcome all of that and catch them up and advance them.
Educational equity ultimately is when every child has the opportunity to succeed in education, regardless of race, regardless of zip code, regardless of color, regardless of ethnicity, where every child has an opportunity to succeed.
So how can we do everything that we can to meet the child where they are? That's what equity is.
And so we have to be willing in our system to give more to those who need more when they need it.
Students, parents, and families are in classrooms every day. So who better to determine what solutions are than the folks who are closest to what's actually happening every day?
We should always listen to students. And we should always ask students what is happening for them and what are their ideas and what are their needs.
It can start by focusing on a small group of students who are experiencing success. And we can do this by listening to their stories, understanding the communities they're from, asking their feedback. And if we do this and we identify their needs, it'll actually build the capacity of the system to impact the whole.
We need more resources in schools specifically that serves Black and brown students, because these students have to work extra hard and do like double the work just to succeed.
For me, having a trusted adult at the school is very helpful, because then you always have someone to talk to here.
I think it would be helpful if the teachers got to know me more and like interact with the students.
If you look at the kids that have stuff going on at home and stuff, and you put in the work to help them, then it can really change their lives.
I stress myself out, so I feel like there should be therapists at each school because it can really help kids.
Especially first-generation college students need more support on what to expect in their future college experience and how to navigate through all that.
It's the ways our systems are set up, like it's very segregated by like neighborhood and race, class, ability. And if we make policies to like integrate schools, not just like physically, but economically, then it will just better the education system for everyone.
What we're seeing more and more today is that belonging and equity are connected. You cannot produce a curriculum, a policy, a treatment of people in a disparaging way if you feel like they belong. You just can't do it. We have to move people to see that other children making it means their child is making it. And if somebody's child is not making it, it means their child is not making it. That's a hard turn for people to make, but that's what's required for people to see that equity is in all of their interests.
We need to actually put our money where our mouth is and resource and invest in education so that we can achieve the outcomes that equity envisions.
I know we will be successful. It's not going to come tomorrow, unfortunately, and it will be a battle, but we will eventually get what's needed in order to truly educate all of our children, regardless of where they live.
While this video takes place in California, I think it's important to note that we have children in North Carolina that face some of these same challenges. And I also want to point out some things that I found that were very important. Number one, relationships matter. We have to build positive relationships with our children, which we're going to get into that in a little while. And then also the importance of social and emotional learning and how connected belonging and equity are. So we're going to take a look at the Building Equity Taxonomy. And the Building Equity Taxonomy has 5 components. They are physical integration, social emotional engagement, the opportunity to learn, instructional excellence, and engaged and inspired learners. We will go over each one of these components. The first is physical integration. Equitable schools are diverse. They value their students' differences and unique experience with the world. So ask yourself, how does your school show that you value your students' differences and opinions? Differences and experiences, sorry. One thing you need to do is get in the know as educators. Become better acquainted with the district decision-making policies by attending school board meetings. Ask students' families to take you on a walk through their neighborhood. The view from the sidewalk is much richer than the view from the windshield. Attend community festivals, meetings, and religious celebrations that you wouldn't ordinarily attend. And take your own personal action to become better informed about life outside of your classroom and in your school community. What steps can your school or district take to ensure equity for all learners?
First of all, common language and understanding what we mean when we say diversity. How is that different from inclusion and equity, and how are those things all related? And once we get a sense of how those things are all related, thinking about ways to help stakeholders from all different areas of your institution get on board with moving from something that's just focused on numbers and who's in the room to making sure those who are in the room are actually fully included and able to participate fully in the institution and help the institution to learn and grow and become more excellent. I think that when we think about diversity, we often think about race and ethnicity alone. And when we do that, we actually miss a lot of what make people up. And while race and ethnicity are super central, critical, important, and core to the work, if we just see people as racial people, we're missing everything else about them: sexual orientation, political beliefs, ways of looking at the world, thinking about and solving problems. Having diversity across all those different arenas can only make us more excellent as an institution. So the work we're actually doing within the school gets better, gets richer, the discussions become deeper, our problems get solutions from all different corners. That diverse group that feels included and where there is equity is going to be able to achieve greater results than a very homogeneous group. And so what inclusion and equity does is it allows us to reap the benefits of the diversity that's present. I think that transition is hard because the pain and the challenges are often invisible, because sometimes the voices of the people who are experiencing exclusion, those voices aren't promoted, those voices are silenced in ways. Diversity is about, maybe you change your admissions practices, maybe you go and look different places to get students, for example. Inclusion and equity requires us to look at our curriculum, requires to look at our budgets, requires us to look at our assembly speakers. It's a much broader change. It's changing or looking through the diversity, equity, and inclusion lens at every single aspect of the school. There are several steps to moving from diversity to equity and inclusion in a strategic way. I think the first thing is there has to be some imperative that comes from the board of trustees or the head of the school, so that people can start to see that this is something that is a huge priority for the whole institution. We need to figure out how we can create a sense of urgency around the shifts and the changes that we need to make. And we need to think about all the different stakeholder groups, and we need to think about what motivates each of those groups. From there, it's about then communicating a clear vision. And once we communicate a clear vision, hopefully people are getting excited, right? And see themselves in the work more. From there, then we need to
figure out what skills do we need to build, what resources do we need, and we need to start providing those to people so they can start to build up their skills. And hopefully at that point, we have some early wins, we have some early successes. And so what we need to do with those early wins is celebrate them and communicate them and broadcast them so that folks who are more reticent start to say, oh, wow, this actually works. Look at these impacts that this work is having, that this teacher did or that staff member did. Once we really get buy-in and you get that motivation and it becomes contagious, then it's time to put in some accountability systems. Because when that motivation starts to die down, when the momentum starts to die down, as in all movements inevitably that happens, there needs to be accountability systems to keep people engaged. From there, I think we need to assess how we're doing in the process and make edits and revisions to our approach. This is really difficult work, and if it's going to take a long time, we need to be in the fight a long time. So we need to make sure that we take care of ourselves and not put too much pressure on ourselves to push things forward by next year. It's not a next year thing. It's a 5 to 10 year change process.
Some other things to consider are having real conversations about the data with administrators, central office leadership, school board members, and policymakers. Some data to consider would be how research shows that historically marginalized students perform better when they have same-race teachers. Also, survey your staff to get an understanding of their beliefs and practices so we can have a better understanding of how their views on race impact educational outcomes. The next component of the Building Equity Taxonomy is social and emotional engagement. We know that schooling is a human endeavor and one that is sustained by a reciprocal trust amongst educators, students, and families. It is essential for schools to intentionally create systems that support the social and emotional engagement of its members and to help them feel understood and valued. Positive student-teacher relationships is linked to academic achievement. Hattie's analysis of the effect of positive student-teacher relationships on learning has an effect size of 0.72, which is equivalent to nearly 2 years of growth. Building relationships with students is hard work and requires daily reinforcement. Students need to be able to trust the consistency of the learning environment, which stabilizes learning. As communities evolve and demographics change, schools and districts are charged with reshaping their practices to best meet the needs of the students and families they serve. We have to have a paradigm shift from expecting the community to adjust to the norms of the unchanging institution. School climate refers to the quality and character of school life. School climate is based on patterns of students, parents, and school personnel's experience of school life and reflect norms, goals, values, interpersonal relationships, teaching and learning practices, and organizational structure. We also need to look at restorative practices, which hold the punitive measures are insufficient response to crime, and that offenders, especially young ones, should face their communities and endeavor to repair harm that they've caused. It gives voice to those who have been affected and allows the offenders to rebuild damaged relationships. When it comes to restorative practices, some things we need to think about are how African American students, Hispanic and Latino students, students with disabilities, and linguistically diverse students are suspended and expelled at a disproportionate rate. Frequent flyers, students who are repeatedly suspended are more likely to drop out of school by the age of 16 or when they reach 16. The message they receive over and over is that they are bad, that their behavior is shameful, and they don't deserve to be in class, and that banishing them from class means they'll fall further behind academically, so they leave school permanently. Attendance. Third graders who are chronically absent are less likely to read at grade level. Now, we know that when it comes to third graders, they don't have control over if they come to school or how they get to school. So that's why it's important to build relationships with families, so you can find out what's going on as to why this student isn't getting to school, and find out what kind of plan can be put in place to help that child get there so they don't miss so many days. Chronic absenteeism in sixth grade is a strong predictor of dropping out in high school. Ninth grade attendance is a better predictor of achievement than eighth grade test scores. Providing families with negative effects on absenteeism can influence choices they make when it comes to their attendance. Also, when it comes to social and emotional engagement, we have to start somewhere, but we don't have to wait for the school to make a decision to address social and emotional learning of children and adolescents. One thing I would challenge you to do is an approach called a 2x10. Every day for 10 days of school, engage a student in a 2-minute conversation that has absolutely nothing to do with academics. Give it a try and see how your relationships with students change. The opportunity to learn or not is a function of the systems we create in our classrooms and schools. In some elementary schools, students are consistently asked to read text well below grade level and then assigned worksheets that emphasize recall and recognition instead of critical thinking. This causes students to become discouraged and develop a negative belief about themselves and school in general. Equitable schools analyze and challenge the structural aspects of curriculum and identify areas that hinder students' opportunity to engage in deep learning. The opportunity to learn is the major variable in student success. A child's last name, their skin color, or family income should never determine his or her future. However, systemic exposure to less challenging curriculum results in depressed achievement. You simply can't learn what you aren't taught. This is very important, and I'm going to say it again. A child's last name, skin color, or family income should never determine his or her future. However, systemic exposure to less challenging curriculum results in depressed achievement. You simply can't learn what you aren't taught. When it comes to the opportunity to learn, it starts with you. Examine classroom grouping practices. Do you use a combination of whole group and small group instruction? Do you group heterogeneously and homogeneously? If you're using the same grouping configuration for 6 weeks or more, it's time to change it up. Now, we're going to watch a video on what steps you can take as a classroom teacher to ensure equity for all learners.
What we're doing is demonstrating how culturally and linguistically responsive teaching looks in the classroom, validation and affirmation of home language and home cultural behaviors through instructional activities for the purposes of building and bridging the students to success in academia and mainstream culture. That really starts with 4 general areas of instruction: classroom management, academic vocabulary, academic literacy, and academic language.
Can you find more than one meaning for each sentence? You guys agree? Nancy said, "Found the big gray cat." It adds engagement to math because sometimes the subject is not highly favored by the students.
We got to be open to try new things because obviously the ways in which we have worked in the past don't work for all kids.
It's really important to me that we all see each other as a team, because when things get really hard in this class, I want them to be able to know that they can depend on each other. And so CLR for me works really well both with accessibility and with that idea of community building and validation for who they are and where they come from and what they bring to the table.
Now I look at culture in such a through different eyes. It's made me a better teacher. It's made my students more engaged every day in the classroom. The students just seem like they're getting it better.
And it really gels it to them, and they realize at that point that this belongs to them.
And it helps you to keep that energy you want to have with them.
It's amazing how well they're able to retain.
Using the different strategies and letting the students guide my teaching, that helps me to be able to relate it to them.
It's important to note that when it comes to steps that classroom teachers can take to ensure equity for all learners, teachers can help or hurt when it comes to equity. Teachers can promote equity by being more race conscious. The next component of Building Equity Taxonomy is instructional excellence. Equitable schools provide all students with an excellent education that allows them to collaborate with other learners. Dr. Johnny Cruz Craig, one of my educational mentors, always says education is a hard matter. Learning is at the heart of what schools do. In equitable schools, leaders make certain that every system is aligned to support teaching and learning, that anything that interferes must go. Educators, whether certified or clerical, need to understand that the work they do contributes directly to the learning of students. The final component of the Building Equity Taxonomy is engaged and inspired learners. Equitable schools see all students as capable and accomplished learners who are constantly building and reinforcing their identity and agency. Students are empowered to use their education to pursue new interests, skills, aspirations, and the school provides support in the form of viable action plans and opportunities. So now is your turn to have some practice with the Building Equity Taxonomy, and we have some scenarios. So you're going to read each scenario, identify the inequity, and then you're going to identify the component which it falls under on the Building Equity Taxonomy, and then you're going to describe how you address or resolve the inequity. So if you look in your packet, you do have task worksheets with this, and we're going to work through the first one together. So Ryan is a 7-year-old first grader. She repeated kindergarten. She lacks social skills, and her home life isn't the best. She comes to school without breakfast. Oftentimes, she runs around the classroom, bothers other students during instruction. She disrupts the class to the point that the teacher can't teach. When questioned about her behavior, she says, "I'm hungry." The school has universal breakfast, which doesn't come around until 9 o'clock. One of the school administrators doesn't think she should be allowed to eat until 9 because that's what's fair. What inequity does Ryan experience, and how would you address or resolve this issue? So if I'm looking at this, I'm thinking she's lacking some social and emotional learning, and we need to start there. But we also need to address the fact that she's hungry. So we need to start by giving her food, and then we need to talk about the skills that she's lacking, and we need to focus on those, whether it be having a guidance counselor come in and do social stories, or pulling her one-on-one to work with her, or even if it's larger than that, and if we need to bring the family in to discuss, what's going on at home and how we can help resolve the issue. There are 3 other scenarios that you will have an opportunity to work through. You have Kelsey, Reagan, and finally, you have Chase. The next step you're going to take is the Building Equity audit. You have a staff audit as well as a student audit. I highly recommend that you complete this, but also utilize this data in a way to form decisions that are made at your school to make sure that all students will receive an equitable education. I like to point out that every school can point with pride to amazing students who take our breath away with kindness, academics, leadership skills, and community activism. They motivate us to do the hard work and the heart's work of school each day. If schools are only producing a handful of these students, there's evidence of an equitable system. Is the ninth grade class larger than the graduating class? What happened to those students? They didn't just disappear. Somehow systems failed them. What about the 30% of kindergartners who've missed 10 or more days of school? Multiply the lost instructional hours and wonder what might have occurred if they've been with you. No school can call itself equitable until every single student gets what he or she needs to strive and grow. Those students who are missing from the graduating class and the kindergarten babies who need a champion, they deserve a champion. Will you be their champion?
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good, some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. I said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class because I am the best teacher and you are the best students. They put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise. You just have to strut. And I gave them a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on this paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad. For years, I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in her desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids who didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids who stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection. It's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
That video is so powerful because every child deserves a champion, and it just highlights the importance of building relationships with our students. We have to build relationships with them. A true champion is also an equity warrior. I hope this session has inspired you to find the warrior in you. Feel free to contact me. My email address is tiagilliamwilson@gmail.com. My cell phone number is 336-267-6998, and my consultation hours are from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. May you continue to have fun and productive learning sessions ahead. Enjoy the summit.